So when James first asked me to come and speak here today, first of all, I didn't realize I was going to be filmed, but I'm incredibly flattered. But I thought about, well, I knew that it was people who were concentrating in technology. And, you know, working in the Bay Area, of course, there's no way I could get away from that. When I first started in advertising, I worked on HP, which the product I worked on was LaserJet. So it was really very fun. And it was at its heyday. So I had a lot of experience down the years of working with engineers and people who were otherwise just very enmeshed in technology. And one of the things, I think the sad things about what I've seen is that usually a lot of people in technology, not everybody, but a lot of people, and a lot of people in marketing, not everybody, don't get along very well. Because marketing can sometimes be seen as a very like frilly, sort of fluffy thing, and in fact, something where you might lie about a product and to actually sell it, or exaggerate. But that's bad marketing. And I saw a lot of people down the road who couldn't get along with engineers because engineers were all very bright. They knew their material inside, in and out, and if you weren't ready to match that as a marketing person or on their advertising team, they would lose respect for you. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this today. I think that marketing has gotten a really bad name. And I think probably ever since the 50s, really, when advertising first emerged on Madison Avenue, and they were doing some kind of crummy stuff then, people sort of got used to the idea that marketing was all about persuasion, but in a bad way. And it was all about talking down to people and trying to get them to buy things that they don't need. Well, in reality, marketing should be only about what people need. And if you take away the gossamer, all marketing is really how to communicate with somebody and tell them about what it is you have and why you think they might need it. That's all it is. Over the years, and especially maybe in, I think maybe the 70s, a lot of acronyms came out and a lot of terms to make marketing feel a lot more fancy and a lot more mysterious than it is. There's brand essence, there's brand equity, there's a SWOT analysis, there's all these different things, and all of them were really born from agencies, either advertising or PR or something like that, to make it seem like they had a black box that nobody else had. Oh, so we talk about this aspect of marketing. When in reality, all it comes down to is what that other person needs and what you think that you can give them. Now, that's the view from the marketing side and what we should be like. Let me skip to the other side and talk about technologists and engineers and what I think they have learned through the years in terms of dealing with marketing. There's an old joke that went around when I was working on the HP account that if HP sold sushi, they would call it cold dead fish. So obviously, a name is a name, right? And I did work with people within HP and Microsoft and Dell and Sun. I've worked with a lot of high-tech companies who tend to kind of want to call it the way it is. And they don't even like the idea of romancing the customer a little bit or showcasing a product or a brand in a way that sort of dresses it up a little and makes it sound good. I mean, when we all go, I like to use the analogy, when we all go to a party, usually you kind of want to do something special for it. Now, you may not, go whole hog and get all dressed up, but, you're going to brush your teeth, you're going to comb your hair, you're going to at least do some basics. It's the same thing with marketing. It's like you want to put your best face forward. You don't want to just show up and go, here I am, what do you think? There is some kind of level of, I don't know, I guess it's just a matter of respect almost to the consumer to sort of say, we're going to present ourselves in a way that maybe is pleasant for you to see today. We're not going to just throw something at you and expect you to care. And in the case of technology, what that was in, I'd say, the late 80s and early 90s, though I see it bearing its head again sometimes now, is the spec sheet. You walk into a meeting with engineers and technologists, and they say, well, this is what the product does, so This is what we want to say in the ad. And you're like, well, okay, we understand that that's sort of what your product is all about. Assuming that, then what, and this is where it gets kind of airy-fairy, what role does it play in the consumer's life? Or, what benefit does it give them? All that sort of talk. That's where that talk came from, getting above the details and trying to have a pitch, if you will, that sort of at least makes it look like you're trying to meet the consumer on their side. Because really all marketing is, besides just talking to people, is that if you've got the two circles and one is the product and one is the consumer, where those two circles meet, that tangent point, that's what marketing is. And the closer you get to the consumer and maybe even choose a way to get to the Venn diagram where there's actually some overlap, the better off you are because people get it. They're like, oh yeah, I get it now. Now let me take a little bit of a left turn here and ask people, has anybody seen the current Facebook advertising on television? Anybody watch TV here? Yeah. I bring it up because it's a good example of going too far, I think. And we could disagree on some, and I'll ask you in a minute, some of the ads or commercials or just plain marketing that you've seen that you think really does a good job or not. For me, it goes too far because it's like, and I'm sure it was as a result of Zuckerberg going to Congress and everything with Cambridge Analytica going on. I'm sure that's why they probably chose this campaign. But in the campaign, it's all about, oh, we at Facebook, we're going to make everything life better for you. And I mean, those aren't the exact words, but it's not too far away. It's like, it's so fluffy. It's almost like you watch it and say, I don't even believe you, even if I felt okay about everything that went on, during the election. It's like, it's still, this seems stupid. It's treating me like an insipid sort of, not a wise consumer, or Facebook user for that matter. So there's a lot of stuff out there that goes too far. I would say that there's only probably about 5% of the marketing that I see out in the world that, and I'm not putting myself up to be the only expert, but a lot of people feel like there's just not a lot of stuff that really, really hits the mark in a way that's like, yeah, I know you're marketing to me, but it's okay, I get it, I know what you got now, and it's either I'm not really interested right now, or that's not for me, or it's like, yeah, maybe I'll think about it. That's the most you can do with marketing, is to get people to think about it. Kind of a sacred cow in advertising, and they're not honoring the sacred cow, which is, if something bad happens, don't talk about it. You don't come out and say, and another adage from all these years is that you don't attack your competitor in your ads. Now, you and I probably know that within I'd say the last 10 to 15 years, those sacred cows have sort of gone away. There are other advertisers who will somehow refer to something bad that happened and probably happened to their balance sheet as a result in advertising. What does anybody think of that? Do you think it's right that that sacred cow goes away? Do you think it's okay or a good idea that advertisers or marketers might talk about something bad and try to show you why it's not a bad thing? Online retail has really changed a lot of things for, I'm not going to say the bad, but it's put people with their own companies online and selling items really in a spot where they didn't have to think about before, because it's so easy to do searches and see everything online, and they might see her product and have a bad experience and then think that you have the same product or something like that. It's tough. I want to go back to the cynicism though too, because people say that now. It's like, well, today, I heard that 20 years ago. That's been going on for a long time. And I guess there's a couple things I have to say about that. One is, when a client comes to an agency, for example, and has something that they want to advertise, you get one of two situations. You've either got a product and there's something to say about it. A classic example would be the iPod with the 2,000 songs in your pocket. A very crisp way of delivering a message that was true, right? The other type of client you have walking in, and not people, but products, I guess, is a product that really is either a Me Too product, there's nothing special about it, or it's a product that's actually a little subpar. And then that's when you end up with marketing and advertising that feels sometimes either like, talking about a bad thing, which, just reinforces your feelings that they're bad, or says something that's it's just too out there and you're like, oh, come on, give me a break. I mean, I'm as much of a cynic as you are. Anybody any intelligent people will look at stuff and say, I don't believe all of it. However, I will also say that I don't know that I can come up with something that you believe in right now, but there is stuff out there there is marketing and advertising out there that is interesting and worthwhile. It's just that, you know what, we just kind of go past that, right? Because we're like, I believe it so it doesn't bother me. The stuff that bothers you, it's like it's always that the crackpots are calling in on talk radio, right? The people have something bad to say, that's what you hear because that's the negative stuff. I think it was hard, backing up a few minutes, you know what, I never thought I would be in marketing. I thought it was kind of, the easy, fluffy stuff. When I went to Stanford, I wasn't actually going to bring that up, but when I went to Stanford, I thought I'd be a management consultant. I even thought about iBanking for a little bit. But when I realized I was not the type, is when I went into a different field, and I just sort of stumbled into advertising, to tell you the truth. And it's a hard career, because you do want to make work, be it print advertising, commercials, social media, whatever you want to call it, that people look at and say, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. But we are all cynics, and I think probably for good reason. I'm not sure that the Mad Men prototype is actually going to last. I would say in about 10 years it will look pretty different. However, I do think that what will stay is there will always be beautiful, enhanced video. I'm trying to not use the word commercial, right? It won't be commercials. There'll still probably be 30-second spots. And we're trained in that regard. I see that, and like part of my work has been to do interviews and focus groups with consumers everywhere and in other countries and show them work and get their reaction and all that sort of thing. The 30-second spot is not going to go away anytime soon. And the beautiful, beautiful photography, film, animation, whatever. I mean, look at Pixar, it's like companies are proving that sort of thing is still really entrances people, and they want to see it, and we have to see it done really well, because if we see something that's a little shoddy, it doesn't make a good impression. So I don't think that the Mad Men model will last, but somehow people will still be creating very beautiful pieces of artwork, essentially, to represent brands and products. Now, is everybody familiar with the Mad Men show? It was done on, it was like 7 or 8 seasons, I think, of advertising in from the late 40s and through the 60s. It's actually a very good program, and it really did depict what women went through and still go through in agencies, what other men do. I mean, men are mean to other men too, but it is really very good, and it's not all that different. It's still a very live hard, play hard culture. And if you're not interested in getting drunk every night, you're probably not going to be as well woven into the culture. None of that stuff's going to go away. Okay, the financial structure of how those companies run, which essentially back in those days, agencies purely made their money on percentage of the media budget. I mean, they saw their product as advertising, but clients more often than not saw the product as the media buy. That's a whole other subject that I won't go into too far, but that's not going to change too much. I mean, that's what the Google and Facebook models of advertising are beginning to pick at. The interesting thing is when Google and Facebook first started doing advertising, you know what I mean by doing, like providing the space in which to put your ads, essentially. When they first started doing that, it was extremely cheap. It's still a lot cheaper than like television, which, as you probably know, can cost $500 to $750,000 for a 30-second spot. Like back in the day on a Seinfeld, or today probably and on Glee. Big programs. It's a lot of money. Online media was much, much cheaper, but as soon as they saw, and I knew this was going to happen, as soon as they saw the writing on the wall, it's like they started upping their prices. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a dramatic change in terms of how they charge, especially with all of the reporting now of fraud in the online advertising world, where there are lots of, let's say I make an ad and I want it to appear, and they're promising me maybe 3 million eyeballs, but 30% of those are just bots online that show that it was shown, but it's not to a real person. So starting with the financial effect, so I do think it would impact both Facebook and Google a lot, and frankly, among us chickens here, when they're talking about online advertising, largely it's Facebook, even more so than Google. Facebook, if you're not doing something with Facebook, I mean, you look at the numbers, you look at the opportunities. There used to be back in the day, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, they talk about appearing on blogs and stuff, and that stuff, blog corporations almost tried to start selling advertising on popular blogs, but that stuff is minuscule compared to what Facebook can do for you, and especially with knowing all of your information. The budgets that are being spent on Facebook and Google are still really small compared to what's being spent on other vehicles like TV, print, outdoor. It's still a very small percentage, and I'm sorry I don't have like statistics to throw up here. I would have done that groundwork if I had known I would talk about this, and I'm happy to talk about it. But it's still a very small percentage of what's spent on advertising. That's what you don't see in the press that much. I mean, one of the things, this is another thing about online advertising, and James and I were joking about this just before we came on, because we used to work in an agency where a guy who's very vociferously against online advertising because of the fraud issue. So I know a lot about it, partly because I read up on what he writes, and he tends to be a real sourpuss, but he's right about a lot of the numbers. He does his homework, I'll give him that. So the question here is, what is online advertising really getting people? It's like 1 in every 10,000 ads out there actually gets clicked on or looked at. Otherwise, Facebook will tell you the number of seconds that supposedly somebody's eyes were actually open and looking at their screen. I mean, literally, they do that. The effect of online advertising on sales has yet to really be determined. On awareness, I would think it's really quite high. I'm not against online advertising. I just think that the idea that it is really doing a lot for the sales cycle for companies is still in question. I mean, mind you, the companies have really used online advertising very well. The big behemoths who have the TV budgets and the promotional budgets, who are sponsoring huge sports championships and so forth. So yeah, I mean, what you're saying is logically true. If that goes away and they can't pick and choose the people who are going to see their ads as well, small companies, they might have to spend more. What I actually think will happen is they'll keep spending on online advertising. It's just that the selects of the people that they can advertise to will not be quite as detailed as they are now. I don't know I can't speak for the Cambridge Analytica thing. And by the way, if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about there, it's the company that worked on Trump's campaign, and actually, what's his name's campaign before that? Ted Cruz's campaign before that, to run things in social media, primarily in Facebook, and actually run ads that were false. Either false in favor of Trump and saying, he's whatever, the greatest businessman in the world, to against Clinton about, literally child sex trafficking rings. They had ads about her running sex rings for kids. So anyway, so that's the Cambridge Analytica thing we're talking about. And the way that they were able to, it's an interesting, it was a professor at, I think it was Oxford, who did a study within Facebook where he collected data on people through a questionnaire that he did on Facebook. You can't do this anymore because Facebook got wise to it, not because they thought it was wrong, but because they realized that they were giving away their own information. And of course, they don't want anybody else to have the information that they have on their users. But that guy built a study. I mean, I wish I had done this. This is how brilliant it was. I wouldn't have used it for maliciousness, but he did this study, and it just basically, he created an algorithm that would profile people. And that's how they, if your big, hot political topic was abortion, that's what you got ads on. If your big, hot political topic was immigration, that's what you got ads on. If your big, hot political point was gun ownership, that's what you got ads on. And a lot of his algorithm was a deduction. It wasn't like, there wasn't a question on the questionnaire that said, do you love guns? He didn't do that. He was able to sort of skate within the information and figure people out. So nobody's probably going to be able to buy the information as specifically as they can now or could in the recent past, but they'll still be able to buy it. I mean, frankly, with what happened with Zuckerberg being in Congress, it was pretty clear to me, again, just my opinion, that it's not going to go away. I mean, everybody kind of just gave it a pass. So with the GDPR, I don't know. Your guess is as much as mine in terms of whether or not it actually makes it here, but they're going to be fighting against it big time.
What is that?
Sort of the where the product or service is on the totem pole of the human mind. It's like toilet paper doesn't have to do content. I mean, that sounds bad, but it doesn't, they don't have to do that for toilet paper. It's so basic. It's, everybody knows what it's for. They have to coupon wildly, and the price wars are constantly going on for something like that. But they don't have to worry about content. I'm just making like a really stark example. I think content has been purely a way to get people to engage one more step. And let me back up and say something about this. It's also about engagement and all this stuff, is that going back to thinking about marketing as a really simple thing, not something really fancy. I'm not going to stand here with a British accent and tell you that you should be working on your brand equity, all that kind of stuff. For me, marketing is breadcrumbs, okay? Your consumers over here, your products over here, you want to sell, or your service, whatever, you want to sell. You have to think about the trail of things that is going to lead that consumer all the way to your product. Now, there's two reasons for that. One is that people aren't just, obviously just you're not going to flip somebody really easily. We all know that. Persuasion is not simple. The other reason is actually that the more you use this breadcrumb approach, the higher the likelihood that that person, once they get there, is going to buy. I mean, in the parlance of the sales world, it's a qualified lead, because this person has chosen to make all those steps. Now, figuring out what those breadcrumbs are is something like what I do for a living for a client. But you can do it for your own businesses or your own product. You just have to be really, really basic and really, really human about it. Even with a business-to-business sale, I don't care what it is, you've got to think about why that person is going to take one more step. Content's just one of those steps. In some cases, it might be right. In some cases, it's not. I mean, you start asking, the word content's been around for what now, 7 years, Before that, it was just, getting people to read about you in Better Homes and Gardens. It's the same thing, It's just we use these words for it, but it's just a matter of moving someone. And that's how you see that marketing is not only, TV advertising, but, the packaging that your product is in, or the fact that word of mouth, which is always and will always be the strongest marketing tool there is. It's just a matter of how to spark it, how to keep it going, and how to sort of keep tabs on it. That the online space is very good for. It's been rare that companies have been able to sort of monitor, if you will. That sounds a little scientific to me. I don't mean it in a cold way. but to sort of see what people are saying about their product. And, it's not just on your site, but it's anywhere. Does that answer your question somewhat? Yeah. So this engagement issue, for me, is just pushing people along the breadcrumb route. And you want to lose the people at the front. You don't need, in the media world, before the online thing came up, we used to use a term called spray and pray. And the notion was that instead of like knowing exactly, being able to reach exactly those people who are interested, you just spray them with a hose, and then you pray that some of them are your target audience. And that's a media approach. In media, they talk, in traditional media, they talk about reach and frequency. Reach is how many people are you reaching. Frequency is how many times are you reaching them. That, by the way, is what I see most in new businesses' eyes, is that they don't get the frequency thing. I'm sorry, but you don't tell somebody once about your product and get them interested. It's not going to happen, So reach and frequency, spray and pray. Now that spray and pray is kind of happening all over again, right? Because people are buying, millions of eyeballs for the precious few hundred, I don't know what it could be, who are really going to buy. Now, because online advertising has been so cheap, it made sense. Who cares if everybody sees it? Fine, I'll just reach more people. But as it gets higher in cost, that will change. And the Facebooks and Googles the Google will have to also pay attention to that. They won't be able to charge a lot higher prices necessarily. They'll have to work with small companies or even large companies to make it work better. This is the essence of strategy, okay? So on a very simple level, strategy is someone's at point A, there's point A and point B, and someone's at point A and you want to get them to point B. I mean, it's a very closed-ended thing. It's not like vision, this, I might be mixing a few metaphors here, but a favorite story of mine is NASA, and that when JFK decided that the vision was to become the leading country in the world in space. But his goal, and thus which set his strategy, was to put a man on the moon. And so you see the difference of these. Yeah, of course you want the vision, but you have to have a milestone you're going to reach in order to really be able to say, okay, what do I need to do that? Well, when he said put a man on the moon, then NASA, they knew what to do. They're like, oh, okay, we're not just like trying to be the best, whatever that is, we're trying to put a man on the moon. And sometimes, usually, you need somebody in an organization who's in marketing to actually set that down and tell the CEO or whoever else and say, okay, yeah, I know we want to be the best. I know we want sales to grow by 10%. I know, all those things are true. But I think if we do this, we're going to move towards that. And that helps you set strategy, and that's the breadcrumb. The other thing about the breadcrumb approach is, I don't mean, which might be what you're facing with some of your clients, I don't mean, well, first we're going to tell them the phone number, and then we're going to tell them the website, and then no, it's moving them in terms of their mind. You don't change people's minds, but you work with what people have in their minds to say, oh, okay, well, that might work for me. That might work for me. Not, that's the best product in the world. It's got to be consumer-centric. It might work for me. Well, in the Facebook example, to take that a step further, it wasn't until Sheryl, what's her last name? Sandberg. It wasn't until she came along and joined the company that they even decided to do advertising. She came in to figure out how to monetize them, which is always a fancy word. I mean, I'm whatever, but people give Zuckerberg a lot of the credit for making it into the mammoth that it is. She had a big role in that. Whether or not, for bad or for good, we could debate that, right? When he first started the company, he swore that he would never advertise on Facebook. He would not ever allow advertising on Facebook. So to your point, I don't know the Google story and how they ended up doing it, but I know at least with Facebook, the intention at first was not to do it, but then they got really greedy, and look where it got them now. So there's a couple things. One is that I think sometimes we get away from the fact that consumers have been manipulated and ripped off for a long time. Like, look what happened with the junk bond era with Michael Milken. For those of you who are not as old as me, basically they decided to turn really, really crummy bonds from very low quality, low yield bonds into, and sort of repackage them and sell them to people, often elderly people who didn't have a lot of money, who felt like they had to invest their money and so on and so forth. If you saw was it The Wolf on Wall Street? If you saw that, that basically is the story. I mean, that was way pre-internet. That was like late 80s. The whole 1980s was pretty rife with that sort of behavior. So it's been going on for a while, and I don't say that in defense of what's going on now. I'm just saying we need, you do need regulations of all sorts, and you need to be able to put teeth in things so that companies will really be penalized if they do anything wrong. I frankly have been surprised in the last maybe couple of years where some companies have stood up and said, okay, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that, we're not going to advertise online where, on some of the fascist and other kinds of websites and stuff where they pulled off. And frankly, I don't know if it's because, it must be because they're afraid of consumer uproar, but I'm not sure. The more vulnerable a person is, the more honored they feel to have somebody marketing to them, and thereby, they might be more receptive. And that can have to do with age. That did at one time have to do with race. When there were first campaigns, literally speaking, directly speaking to African Americans, it was a very positive response. It was like, yes, we're finally seeing ourselves in, products that we buy. That's changed over the years. I mean, not just for that group, for any group that feels like it's being kind of ripped off. So it kind of, there's an ebb and flow to it. I don't know the answer to the question about whether or not Facebook campaigns typically do better with a 65 and over, and that would have to do with, looking at what you're selling them and everything. But I don't know about that per se. I mean, I think Facebook will change somewhat. I have a feeling that really the biggest places that it's going to be felt in the United States, if the GDPR issue gets followed up and if other things happen, is going to be with the larger companies, not really the smaller ones. Because Facebook doesn't care as much about the smaller companies, so you're probably not going to see a lot of change there. I mean, I'm waiting for some of you guys remember the day when Bill Gates was the devil? Bill Gates used to be the devil. Bill Gates is a good guy now. Now we've got Zuckerberg. He's on his way to being the devil. Maybe the two Google guys will be, I don't know. But, companies and personalities within companies go through cycles. A lot of kids probably don't even know who Bill Gates is now, but back in the late 90s, they thought he was going to bring down capitalism barehanded. Well, I think that probably the broadest one, which you'll still be able to buy, but they're just going to be more careful about it, is race. That is going to be a hot one for a while, because apparently some companies have purposefully used it in ways that are not kosher for most of us. But other than that, I mean, basic information like, do you want to be in contact with me? Like some of those landing pages where you get there and you go, oh, the product's not out yet, but if you want to add your name here, we'll let you know. That's not going to go away. And it's really, I think, if anybody, there are interesting general articles written, especially in the New Yorker and the New York Times, to the Washington Post to a degree, that if you just go ahead and search on some of these issues, you might find an article that actually explains it to you in a way that makes sense to you in your business. And I would recommend that just to be on top of it. So I have one big one and probably a couple small ones. And the big one is something that I've already kind of alluded to earlier. But that's that when you are writing something or having someone write for you, any kind of marketing materials to people that you want to sell to, read it out loud and pretend like you're just talking to another person that you know. You take out like all the business speak words like utilize, even benefit. I mean, people, in marketing we talk about the benefit to the consumer. I don't look at something at the store and go, well, wow, that's really a benefit to me. So write it in the plainest talk that you can. I would do that, like one of the things that I did when I was in the ad agency world, which is where I knew James, I was responsible for writing the creative brief. And there are 7 questions, I think, on the brief. These are the only questions you ever need to worry about answering for marketing, period. Okay, one is, what are we trying to do? Again, all in plain words. I can get a copy of a creative brief structure to them. This might be helpful. What are we trying to do? Who's the target audience? What do they think now? What do we want them to think? And think, do, feel, whatever. What do we want them to think? What's the one thing we can say about our product or our business that's going to move them from, there you go, that point A to point B? And then one more question. What's that one thing that we can say about our product or our brand? And lastly, maybe most importantly on the whole brief is, why can I truthfully say that? The support for your proposition. Now that's where, like in the hardware world, hardware world, speeds and feeds come in and stuff. Those are the features of your product or what you offer in your service area, whatever it is. That's where those go. But the reason that they're important is all those things have to be true in order to support that proposition, for you to feel really genuine, authentic, and not having some cynic look at your ad and going, oh yeah, right. That's it. Those questions are the only things you will ever need. It could be about your new product. It could be about a product that you're trying to revive the sales in, whatever. So reading things out loud and making it sound, pretending like you're actually just talking to another person, is the way to write things that don't sound like they're coming in over people's heads, trying to be slimy and like not saying much. It's my numero uno way of feeling like what I'm setting down as a marketing strategy will hold water. You know, what's the personality that I want to play back? That is often true when you're doing something with a brand. Like you can imagine, like the Nike brand has a certain personality that it always puts forth. Apple has a certain brand personality that it puts forth. So there's personality, the other one is voice. They're very close, but they're a little bit different. Voice is like the language that's used for like diapers. It's going to be very much a mom voice with the personality of your best friend who lives a couple doors down, who, you know, is always there to help you out. That's that realm. IBM, different. That's a hot topic among a lot of people in advertising and marketing too, is whether or not humor, what's the role of it? Should it always be used? So with Geico, 15 minutes will save you whatever. We don't even know. We don't even care what the actual dollars are. We know. And immediately you know, oh, they're low price. You know, we know what their positioning is, right? So it's not that, I don't even know if Geico really is the lowest price.
Actually, we did some comparisons.
Yeah, so there you go, okay? The thing is the reason why they grab the market, and this is still true, it's probably the way of capitalism maybe, first mover. If you're the first one to say something and you do it in a really captivating way and quick, you're going to be out there. You can imagine how hard it would be for another car insurance or any insurance company to come along and try and grab that spot from them. A couple have even tried, you know, and it just doesn't matter. The other thing that's interesting to me about Geico, and this is more of a big company aspect, but they were the first, I want to say the first company to have 3 or 4 different campaigns going on at the same time. Now, for what, and it was sort of along the lines of their target audiences. The really funny ones were all aimed at men like 18 to 45 or something like that. And then there were other ones that were like a little bit more touchy-feely in one case, and they run them all at the same time. The funny ones get more airtime because they do really well, and it's an audience that they really want, especially the young men, because everybody wants to get the young men in the insurance industry because it's a big block of people who don't believe they need insurance, apparently. One of the things, the campaigns of all time that I really liked was the Apple versus the Microsoft guy. Remember the white screen with the two guys? I mean, if you can take high-tech companies and personify them and just think about how many points they got across that people actually listened to. That if it was any less of a real language example, most people would just tune in. You're home at 8 o'clock, you've been at work all day, you know, you're waiting for your favorite show to come on or something, you're doing stuff and, you know, some commercial comes on that talks about computers and, you know, there's no way you want to listen to it. But they got so much mileage out of that. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I'm talking about. The personality doesn't have to be the same. It could still be like real language for whatever product you have. It doesn't have to be, you know, the way they chose to do those ads. But it will always, people will listen when they feel like somebody's really talking to them. Typically, companies don't go past like 3 or 5% of revenue in order to build a marketing plan. I would be surprised if Geico went outside of that same scenario. I think, you know, and that feels logical. You know, we can't help but as humans, I think, to like look at something and say, well, wait a minute here, what's, you know, yeah. But they're willing to make the trade-off. So they've got a campaign that everybody knows. And, you know, it's not that everybody needs to know it, but most people buy car insurance or need car insurance or drive cars in this country anyway. So it's a trade-off for them to have somebody say, wait a minute, I'm not, you know, that's expensive advertising, yeah. If you have a product that is, I don't know, I want to say fun to watch. Like I don't know if anybody knows the beer brand Duvel. It's a Belgian beer. It's like a Chimay. Like Chimay is the big Belgian beer line, but Duvel is actually a more authentic Belgian beer than Chimay is, and they have a tulip-shaped glass. This was my client. I'm not just fantasizing about having beer. They have a tulip-shaped glass, and there's a little etching in the bottom of the glass so that it bubbles more and stuff, and it's just really super cool. So when they started their, they were not selling in the United States when I worked on their business. I think it was 2007. And for them, the recommendation was to actually do something that was on YouTube that was about the glass and about the pour. Now, was that because people needed to know about the glass and about the pour? No. It was because watching that glass and the pour was fun. And for real beer connoisseurs, and this was like, I wasn't the beginning of the craft beer thing, but it was like when it was really gaining ground, there were a lot of guys, especially out there, who were like, beer is just as serious as wine. You know, I'm tired of these wine people. They're so smug, and you know, it's like, beer is really, do you know how hard it's, you know? And so that romanced that, and that got them in. So it depends really on what the product and the consumer wants at the same time. So what I would recommend is that you don't do everything, okay? But you make that list in the same way that you would determine that breadcrumb approach with what the messages are. You also determine what are the sort of ways of communicating that help both my product and the consumer. That's good for both of them. And that's not, you know, is it going to be a podcast? Well, I mean, it depends. Do you have something really interesting to say that people want to listen to? Maybe. I worked on the launch of Audible too, and obviously Audible was Audible. Audible.com is just basically a listening. At the time it was a service, but it's a way to listen to movies and books and other kinds of printed material that are being read, and in that case. What they've done recently in their advertising, I don't know if you've seen it, but they do these huge scenes and they're beautiful and all that kind of stuff. I don't know how well that's working, but I knew at that time that, and it was small, I mean, it was a startup when I worked on it. We were like, go visual. You know, everybody knows what you are, you're Audible, right? So go visual, go with some beautiful scene from some book that literary people, because it's mostly literary people using it, that literary people will recognize and like go gaga over, because you know we all have these pictures in our heads when we read, right? So, or popular book covers, you know, it's like push it that way. So sometimes it can be the reverse of what you know your product already gives. So I guess that goes to say that it's just you need to be somewhat creative in your thinking about it. And if you're too close, then you should hire somebody to help you with it. But you know, you don't have to hire an agency. You don't have to. You need to have. If you guys are hiring people or talking to people about maybe hiring them, it's the chemistry between you and that person that's going to be the most important thing, not what's on their resume. Of course, you want somebody who's, you know, educated, I suppose, but, you know, it's really chemistry. Do they get my product? Do they get excited when they talk to me about it? Can they come up with some ideas on the fly that are kind of interesting? That's what you need if you feel like you have too much to do or you don't have the right frame of mind to do that. And Netflix, I worked at on the beginning of Netflix too, when they were doing, some of you guys will remember, they did rent to own. That's what you did. You got your DVD in the mail and for a rental price, but if you really loved it, then you kept it and you paid the price to buy it. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but that's how they started. And I helped them move from that model into a rent-only model. And there's not a cool example like there was with the beer and Audible for that. But the point was that at that point, when they were switching the nature of their business, they had to think hard about, well, how do we get through to people? You know, where do we go to, you know, like there's the Blockbusters on every corner, there's all this other stuff going, there's Tower Records in San Francisco where everybody goes. You really have to think creatively to sort of say, well, you know, how am I going to push the edge for my little thing? And then you're Netflix. So I think that's it. You're welcome. It was fun. This is what they do now, right? I clap for you too. Thank you.